Arthur College really has become the light of spiritualism, which really we have to acknowledge, and maybe some people don't realise that without Gordon and Higginson, even though Arthur Finley left us the building, we wouldn't have the college that we have today. And I've been there a long time, and you've been visiting there many years before. No, I'm not Mavis. And I've seen things alter and move and change in different ways, and I'm sure it must have been a little different when you first went to my first time.
Oh God, I remember going at the beginning, Paul with Gordon, and we'd pull up and it'd be about 12 o'clock at night, absolute black. I mean, no lights, no car park like we've got today. And you'd go into this big old, it was awful. You know, like you watch these horror stories. Well, it was like that going in the first time. No lights on the corridors. You had to have your lighter, because, I'm a smoker, and your lighter would be going, and he'd say, "Come on, Mavis, don't be worried there. If there's any spirits here, there are spirits." And he'd walk us through. And, no loos in your bedroom. You were walking down darkened corridors. You always took a torch with you.
I heard, was there still dormitories then? When everybody
Oh, absolutely.
I heard the men and women couldn't, even their husband and wife couldn't sleep together.
No, if you were up in the, what I think must have been the maids' quarters, or it could have been the leftover, I think, from when the RAF were there after the war. But there was just the curtains coming round, and you just had one little tiny cupboard, and but it was everybody was together.
I think you were there from late 60s, early 70s, when the Longton people from Gordon's Church used to go. They used to pay to go, and they would take all the food and cook the meals themselves, and they would all have to clean because the second floor was closed off. Do you remember that? And it was just years and years of dust, and they would do all that work even though they paid to go. And they told me that then Gordon would reward them with a physical seance for all that.
Absolutely, he would do that all the time. If you went down to the college, you went to work. So when I first started to go down, of course I wasn't a tutor. I was being trained by Gordon. So I would be expected to go into all the lectures, but I had my work to do, such as I always did the flowers. And the corridor where you've got the shop now? Well, that just used to be a flag-flown corridor, because, of course, we've got the dining room that wasn't there. And I used to have to clean all the flowers, so there was vases and vases of flowers, and it smelled awful. And he'd say to me, "Now, go into the kitchen because there's no food being cooked. You can wash up in there," and off you'd go.
Do you remember after the day's work and the evening's work, we'd all have tea and toast, and if you were the new kid on the block,
you had to do it.
It was your job to make the tea and toast for all the other mediums.
Absolutely, you were not allowed downstairs until all the old mediums, and they used to sit round in that little sitting room, and you'd have to make sure you'd given them everything they wanted at their hand, and then you could go down to the bar. And other than that, you couldn't go down to the bar. And of course, it was all lectures then. And I think we've missed out on a lot, but I think one of my most amazing stories are walking up and down the corridors in the absolute pitch black. And there was a person there, and she said, "There's a cavalier walks up and down these corridors." It was enough to put me off. Really was. And I went to Gordon and I said, "Who's this cavalier?" He said, "Mavis, there's no cavaliers here, only me."
So how long did you go to the college as a student before you actually worked there?
I would have thought it would have been about 2 years before I was allowed to take one on my own. But what he would do is he would be lecturing on a point, and then he would say, "Now Mavis is going to come up and show you what I mean." And I would have to go up then and do it.
My first week I worked as a teacher, he booked me for the March when he died in the January, and it was a new week he was introducing, and there was me and Simon he booked for the first time, and you and Glyn Edwards, and you and Glyn took over that week. That was mine and Simon's first experience of working as a teacher there.
The first week that I organised was Gordon's Awareness Week and he handed that to me.
I remember that.
And I felt so honoured that that he felt that I was ready to do awareness. And the one thing I always loved that he did, I don't know if you remember, but he used to hold his hands up and he'd say, you know, be aware of the energy and the power of the spirit in the library. And you could almost feel it as the spirit world were so joyous that they were being recognised without having to give evidence, but you had to be aware of the spirit.
Well, he actually got me to be an organiser before I was a tutor there.
Did he?
If you remember, you know, in the early years and for many years, most of the weeks were either church weeks or district weeks, and Longton Week had stopped, so he wanted me to start Longton Week back. And I just thought the general organisation. So I said, when will you have time to sit with me to tell me what mediums and tutors you want, what programme you want? And he says, I've given it you to organise, so you decide which mediums and what lectures. And so really, he was training me to be an organiser right from the beginning of courses in all aspects.
And I didn't come up that way. I came up as a helper, then I came up as a student, and then I came up as an experimental medium to do the things with him. And, you know, learning the diagnosis, learning to read. And what we don't do as much now of is we don't get people to recognise that we should make more contact with the spirit incarnate. He kind of taught you how to differentiate between the incarnate and the discarnate, and how the power as it rises must make its pathway, and that's through decision of the medium.
I remember speaking to him in the car, and I thought he'd be very pleased with me. I said, when I'm ready to begin professional private sittings, I'm only going to see people who've lost people to the spirit world. He looked at me and he said, who are you to decide that? Somebody grieving for the loss of a job, a broken relationship, are just entitled to help as somebody who's lost somebody to the spirit world. And I had to change my whole approach and attitude after that.
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, he made me cry sometimes because I'd do something and I'd think I'd done it right, and I'd come out and he would say, no, that was wrong and that was wrong and that was wrong because you didn't do this, you hadn't approached that. So it wasn't there, well done. It was, you really didn't get the praise of you're amazing.
That's
you
right.
got more, do more.
I think it was like that with all of us because I had to learn that if he didn't say anything, then I knew I'd done okay.
Yeah.
Or otherwise, afterwards he'd say, shall we have tea, sit down, now I'll tell you everything you did wrong.
I remember going to Manchester and doing a dem with him at the town hall, I think it was, or somewhere. There was a queue of people, but they all had placards, you know, don't. We were running the gauntlet, really going through. And I stopped because I was so upset that they were saying I worked for the devil. And I really stopped and said to this man, no, I don't work for the devil, I work for the spirit world. And I'm going like this, you know, really defensive of spiritualism. And I got into the hall with him and he said, never do that again. He said, if you have to defend spiritualism, then it means you are not sure of spiritualism. If you are sure of spiritualism, you believe it. You don't need to force it on anybody.
I remember him saying, and you must have heard it as well, that somebody said he was doing the work of the devil. It may be the same meeting he was referring to. And he turned around and he says, well, if the work I do is of the devil, then I'll work for the devil any day.
Yeah, he would never argue. But he taught me a great lesson that night because he took me and I felt like a little girl.
But he would throw you in the deep end, not actually always teach you how to do it. I can remember him saying to me, Paul, he says, we were in the sanctuary and it was full with the students, and he says, right, I want a contact from somebody from the spirit world for somebody at the back of the room. So I said, well, why and how? And he looked at me and he said, that's for you to find out. But it made you work for your answers and understanding, but also he could see by that, I think, what stage you'd arrived at with your development and understanding.